Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Village of Lytton's Committee of the Whole meeting on March 3rd. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone to please turn off your videos, mute your microphones. Please note that this meeting is being recorded, but is not being live streamed. Thank you, Your Worship. You may call the meeting to order.
Thank you. Election 1-1, good morning, everyone. I call this Committee of the Whole meeting to order at 11 a.m. I want to begin by acknowledging that we're meeting on the unceded traditional and ancestral territory of the Entrecatean people. All right, so we have an agenda before us, but we are going to be amending to add an item under new business, and that's regarding the canceling of the April 7th Committee of the Whole meeting. So can I have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended?
So move Lightfoot.
Thank you. And a seconder?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor McCann. All those in favor? Carried. Right, so we have the minutes of the February 3rd Committee of the Whole meeting in front of us. And can I have a motion to adopt those minutes?
I also move.
Thank you, Councillor McCann, seconded by Councillor Michelle. Any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Carried. All right, public comment. I'm going to turn it back over to Corporate Officer Storoshenko.
Thank you, Your Worship. So members of the public are now invited to comment on matters related to the agenda. If you'd like to speak, please use the raise hand function on Zoom. You can find that by clicking on React at the bottom of your screen and click Raise Hand. When it's your turn, I'll read your name and you'll be asked to unmute yourself. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. Please state and spell your name and say your address. If anyone would like to speak, please use the raise hand function now. I'll call for a second time. If anyone would like to speak, please use the raise hand function now. And there is no one here at Parish Hall, so back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you. So we'll move on to item number 6, which is staff reports. And we do have a report on the road infrastructure planning. And I'm going to ask CAO member Kat. There she is.
Thank you very much, Mayor O'Connor. Good morning, everyone. This item on the agenda is to have a discussion with council around, our plans for roads and sidewalks and curbs and those types of things. As you know, a lot of our streets have already been I wouldn't say destroyed, but they've been significantly impacted by the fire and then the resulting remediation. And they will continue to be impacted as we move forward with sewer and water projects. So we do have technical standards for roads and curbs and sidewalks as part of our subdivision and development servicing bylaw. But what we wanted to talk to council about is just a little bit not as much about the technical aspects of it, but more about how they kind of look and feel and what kind of standards that we want to have throughout the village. We're working on putting together a bit of a plan so that as we are completing the water and sewer projects, we can reestablish the roads, sidewalks and curbs. And as we're doing budgeting and tendering and things, know what level we're striving for based on a future report that we'll bring to council for their approval. So for today, we just wanted to have a little bit of a discussion about some of the considerations that there are, for roads and sidewalks and curbs, and then kind of, take that away and kind of mull it over and come back to council with a little bit of a program of, standards that we're looking to hit. So I am going to turn it over to our municipal engineer, Daryl Ixani, and he's going to take us through the presentation and some of the considerations. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Yes, as was mentioned, now that we're approaching getting some of our deep utilities in the village replaced and repaired, we want to take a look at what do we ultimately want the streets to take a look or to look like as we start getting in position to actually repair them. So yeah, you could go to the next slide there, Lisa, please. Yes, we want to have a conversation on on what the streets will look like now that we're completing some of the infrastructure improvements around the village. Last year we did a fair bit of work, and this year we've got a major undertaking in the village with the primarily the sewer in the village west of Main Street. So we want to think about how do we want the streets to look, and there's many factors that go into how a street ultimately looks. And some of the elements you can't see. So we want to have a little bit of a discussion on what these will look like, and also give you an idea of some of the planning processes, just so you can understand what some of the underground stuff, how that impacts what some of the surface stuff may look like. Next slide, please. So typically when we're looking at what a road typical section may look like in terms of pavement, curbs, sidewalks, street lighting, and that sort of thing, it's typically dictated largely by, what type of land is being serviced. So we're looking at residential, commercial, and industrial. And each of these has different considerations. So we look at the traffic type and volume, because traffic type it impacts the load and the structure of the roads and so forth. Type of property that you're accessing. So for example, parking needs. Commercial, you need a high level of parking. Residential, in some cases, you need a moderate amount, and in some cases, very low amount. Also, what do you need for pedestrian circulation and access? So if you're accessing a business, you want to have good access to that business. There's engineering requirements and things that go into that. At the upfront stage, there's planning in terms of where do you want to put some of these utilities. So for deep services, what we refer to as water, storm sewer, and sanitary sewer. They're deeper in the ground, so we call them deep services, but they have specific requirements, and particularly for interior health, water has to be a certain distance away from your storm sewers and your sanitary sewers. So you have to be cognizant of that when you're starting to plan and position all these elements in the roadway. In terms of drainage design, typically and historically, we've piped drainage away from the streets through pipes and to a discharge point. There is some newer types of disposal techniques, and we'll take a look at those a little bit later. And then lastly, you always need to consider what you're doing for maintenance. So typically in Lytton, there's been a lot of pavement, sidewalk, and then brick raceways that can be used for like street lights and such. Those typically have lower requirements for maintenance. If you start putting in grass and different things, that can create a more of a need for maintenance. So now it becomes a cost long term to the village. Next slide, please. So one of the questions we want to ask is, do we want the roads to look exactly like they were historically? And in some cases, we can see that. And in some cases, during the remediation, we can't, because a lot of the stuff has been damaged severely. So some of the modifications that we could take a look at is where do we want sidewalks? Do we want sidewalks on both sides? Do we want sidewalks on one side? Lower traffic areas may not even require a sidewalk. So for example, maybe up on Station Road, you can take a look at, do we need a sidewalk or do we not? So there'll be some input required there, and what does the community want to have there? Some compromises, of course, may be needed depending on what our funding allocation for the particular repairs are. Typically, for all the grants that we've brought forward to council, we've included a portion of sidewalk and curb repair. Next slide, please. So in the existing subdivision servicing bylaw, we have 3 typical sections, is what we call them. This defines the road elements that council has historically approved. Before you, we have a local street standard, which I would call the residential standard. And it's divided into a major and a minor. And typically, a minor is a little bit narrower with parking one side. A major has parking on both sides. In this case, that section shows a sidewalk on one side only. And then there's another one is downtown commercial. This is essentially the same, but it has sidewalks on both sides. And it's a little bit wider to accommodate parking on both sides. There's also a third which has not been presented, and it's an industrial standard, which is we don't really have a lot of use in Lytton. I suppose we could discuss the North Station section where there's access to the CP rail yards, which probably could be classified as an industrial section. And by the way, there's also a few additional slides that we'll have later on and a map that's not in the council package. So there will, when we get to those, we'll discuss those further. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so for the fundamental elements for the local or residential standard, there's 2 traffic lanes each direction, 1 parking lane, and possible streets that we may consider currently that are built to this standard would be First Street and Station Street. That would be north of 6th. And typically consider these suitable for residential areas with low off-street parking demands. If you get into a situation very like a terminal end side road, such as a cul-de-sac, in a lot of cases in other municipalities, the sidewalks aren't provided. It depends on pedestrian flow, and if you have pedestrian walkways and walking paths, for example, maybe that you need a continuation of a sidewalk pedestrian access. High traffic residential streets may require sidewalks and parking on both sides. And in the village, I would consider maybe Fraser Street would be classified as this. The Fraser Street is fundamentally built to a commercial, the downtown commercial section, but it'd be considered a residential, but with the difference being it has sidewalks on both sides, not just one side. Next slide, please. So for the downtown commercial configuration, there's 2 travel lanes each direction, 2 parking lanes, and streets to this standard. We consider Main Street and Fraser Street, and also 2nd through 6th Street. Now, historically, it looks like there's typically been 2 drive lanes each direction and a parking lane on 2nd through 6th. In some cases, 2nd, I think, is probably primarily residential, so perhaps we could consider alternate configurations, and perhaps we could extend that to 3rd, 5th, and 6th as well, depending on the access to properties that are required. For drainage improvements, I've noticed on 3rd and 4th Street that the pavement is failing in sections, and this is largely, in my opinion, due to poor drainage. So there's saturation of the surface soils, and that's, creating a weak layer underneath, and as traffic rolls over, it starts to fail the roadway. So when we're improving this in conjunction with some of our deep services and how we're disposing of drainage runoff, we want to consider how that all comes together so the road will give you an adequate life. One of the things we'll want to consider is that historically, what have you seen for parking needs in the village? Do we want to maintain the existing roads and parking levels that was there previously? Was it inadequate, or was there too much? So a conversation that we should have. Next slide, please. So this section is one we did up, and this is essentially similar to what we have at a downtown commercial. But what I've done is I've added in some of the other utility elements that you typically see in a municipality. So now we can see the underground. It's also showing, where we may put a hydrant, street lights. It shows where hydro and your communication TELUS lines would go. And if you have gas, Fortis gas shows where that goes. Typically for, long term, and I'm not thinking just short term, but long term, you may want to be putting some of your utilities underground. So you want to plan for that in the near term, because if you start putting other utilities in that space or corridor, you've got a situation now where you don't have a proper place to put those utilities down the road. So in 20 years, you decide that you want to go underground in certain areas. Well, now if you've got a sewer line there, you can't do that. So you have to relocate the sewer line. So it's nice to look at that, early in the design when you're putting these streets together. So in terms of critical elements, it is primary space requirements. Water requires 3 meter spacing from other deep services just for contamination purposes to protect any influence. And the second, probably most important, will be underground power. That has to have certain space requirements from other elements like gas and your communication lines. If you are going overhead with your power, it's not really the same situation. You just have to make sure you provide a suitable corridor for that line to go in. Next slide, please. So this is one of the sections that I added that wasn't in the council package because I just wanted to discuss broadly across the village what the street sections are. So I would consider this a rural, an urban rural is what typically would be called. It's has 2 drive lanes, a shoulder. It also will have utilities in the groundwater and sewer typically, and any storm drainage and runoff is usually handled through a ditch system. Next slide, please. So for our lanes, typically what is done is you create an inverted laneway. That way you don't get runoff and drainage that goes onto private lots. And then you will provide some sort of drainage structures, a catch basin in the middle to take the drainage away. Typically, this will go essentially property line to property line as a paved section. This section, the section we're showing here is very typical to what we'll be doing on West Lane on the upcoming construction project. It'll be very similar to also to other lanes like Alonzo and Center Lane, with the difference being that some utilities will be different. So, for example, Center Lane will be putting in a sanitary sewer and a storm sewer. There is no water. But Alonzo and West Lane will have water and sanitary sewer. Next slide, please. Again, this is this was just an overall map. Wanted to generally show you where these current roads are located. So the red on the bottom of the figure, that's the urban rural configuration with open ditch drainage that we have in the village right now. The pinker cyan line is generally the downtown commercial. The green is the green lines are generally the residential standards, the local standards, and then the blue is the lane standard. Next slide, please. So, I mean, in terms of, how much we want the streets to look, like they were historically, there may be limited amount of changes that we can make. Most streets are typically 20 meters property line to property line. We call that the road allowance. So we've got to fit all the utilities and the suitable widths for parking and for drive lanes and for your boulevard areas, sidewalks. We've got to fit all that stuff in there. So considerations you can make is that do you want to have some soft scaping in terms of like grass and street trees? Or do you want to have like patio pavers and that sort of thing that may be lower maintenance, but then in the summertime you may have issues with respite from heat and so forth. So, and again, for parking, we want to have adequate parking to accommodate particular land use that we are accessing. So all the utilities will have a corridor. So typically this is an early planning phase where we want to look at where the location in the street, where the water mains, sewer mains, storm mains, or infiltration systems, as the case may be, street lights, sidewalks, parking, and shallow utilities like hydro and communications and gas. Next slide, please. So more recently, one of the things that's being incorporated into a lot of cities and municipalities is bioswales. So essentially, it's like an old style open ditch, but there's no outlet on it. It's basically just a soak away. So you design it accordingly so water will accumulate. You properly size it for the amount of, the rainfall intensity and durations that you would have. And the water will stay there and it'll seep and soak away into the ground. It won't discharge to a creek. And typically what they do, if you can see almost in that one, there's little curb cutouts that they put along the gutter of the street, so water will flow into those swales, collect, and then slowly dissipate. Next slide, please. So I looked at one possible alternate that you could maybe consider for a downtown commercial section. So what I did here is essentially I took the downtown commercial that we have approved, and I changed the slope of the pavement so it drains into the middle of the road. And then we put in a little bit of a soak away area in the middle of the road, and that's where you could put trees as well. You could then reduce a lot of the maintenance and watering requirements, from public works staff to maintain the trees, because they'll be naturally getting water and the runoff will be flowing into that. The soils are quite amenable in Lytton to accepting infiltration and water. But the side benefit here is that you don't have to have public works staff going and watering trees as much. And then the water would just generally soak away into the ground and not discharge down to the outfall at Hobo Hollow. And we have here some general samples of streetscapes. These here on the left, you would have like a residential standard trees one side. Yeah, you can see the ornamental street light on the right side, and then a parking lane. Similar on the left side, same sort of thing, trees on one side and parking on the right side. And then here's some samples of typical urban street sections. And this will be largely what, ultimately your downtown commercial will again look like one day, where you've got parking on both sides, two drive lanes. And you've got, if you're sticking, you can see there's a street light in one of the pictures, and also some overhead power lines. Okay, discussion.
Well, thank you, Daryl. Something that you said, one of your first slides, or that I read on one of the bullet points, was how the community may want this to look. And I think that's what we're here for. Considering budgets and future development and all those kinds of things as well. I'm wondering if you go to the slide that lists, or I'm just thinking here, the modifications to consider. And then we can use that as a discussion to get discussion started.
You're looking for?
It's just near the end. Yeah. I just think that it's kind of helps to highlight some of the things that you're looking for around discussion.
Yes.
So who would like to start? Would anyone like to begin with thoughts, comments, ideas? Councillor Toss.
Thank you, Mayor O'Connor. I only have a few comments. Just in regards to grass or trees, I just think irrigation and maintenance are going to be so paramount. We've not had a lot of luck in the village of Lytton in the past keeping trees alive. So if there's no irrigation, even with that center proposal, I don't have a lot of faith in rapid growth of trees without that being the water source being the main concern to keep trees growing. I don't think grass is something we want to maintain. It's pretty tough, but a canopy of trees is something personally I think would really benefit the village. And we've talked a lot about the benefit of trees in the past. And then street parking at the hub, I'm not sure if this is been considered. I think CAO Mumberket, I mentioned that as a question to you about the Catholic Church parking lot, the Catholic Church property potentially being part of the parking for the hub. I know it's in the middle and it would be nice to have it more as a park-like amenity space, but it might be worth discussing with the Catholic Church just to alleviate some of the pressures on that project. And then something I've been working on early on when I came on council was getting BC Hydro services underground in Center Lane, because currently we have all the services for the properties on Center Lane, the commercial side and the residential side, both draw power off Main Street opposite side or Fraser Street opposite side. As the village develops, we're going to have more and more wires across both Main Street and Fraser Street to accommodate this growth. And at the time when I brought this forward, I was told that we didn't have the staff capacity to work with BC Hydro on this. And I had actually had a proposal from BC Hydro. However, they misunderstood my request and gave us an estimate for the whole village to go underground. But there is a hybrid option that hasn't been explored because of staff capacity, is what I understand. But if we have staff capacity now, it would be amazing to at least cost that out, because not just aesthetically, but from a safety point of view, having those wires, fire safety, the wind as a factor, the fact that we have our power go out all the time aesthetically, and also as Highway 12 is a highway, it potentially would reduce the ability for a larger item on the back of a truck to come down Main Street. So something that was above that 15 meters or whatever it is for like a house. I don't know if that's too high, but it seems like those wires now might restrict some movement. Anyways, I can't say enough about trying to get the services underground in Center Lane as the sewer project progresses.
Great,
I know
thank
that was
you.
a lot of comments, but
Yeah.
that's all of them. So thank you.
Because that's the kind of consideration I think they're looking for. Is so if
Thank you.
we are going to be moving ahead with underground, then they need to design the roads
Exactly.
that way.
Thank
So,
you, Mayor
yeah, thank you.
O'Connor, for considering that.
So other comments, questions, Councillor McCann?
I look at the grass question and I immediately went, no grass. And then I looked at what Daryl was suggesting, and to understand the value in having the grass work as a water filter and not having water all over the roads, I can see the benefit of that. And when we get rain lately, there is that capacity issue that comes up, right? Because sometimes it's been really hard rain. So I'm not quite sure. I wouldn't mind hearing more about that and how much maintenance those swale systems would require. Like, do you have to have somebody go out there and mow that grass in the summertime? Because you sure don't want it to become a fire hazard. So I wouldn't mind hearing more about what exactly that would look like and how you would maintain that. And when you suggested putting something down the middle of the street, it was just so foreign to me. I just went, oh. And I immediately moved it over to 4th. Like, oh, we could do that on a side street. I could live with it on a side street. I couldn't live with it going down one of the main streets. That just didn't work for me at all. But I can see how that would really make 4th Street a really nice place. Like, if you have that center lane with trees and grass or whatever it is, and a little bit of a feature, as long as things are slow moving, because you don't want somebody driving into your tree in the middle of the night. But I don't know. I'm kind of curious to hear more about that as well. I agree with Councillor Toss about preparing for underground services. I know we've all really wanted that right from the start, and it's been a real problem to have to just kind of bite your tongue and live with the consequences of whatever. But if it's ever possible, it sure would be nice to have that stuff out of there. And those are my main ones, I think. But when I was walking around today, looking at the different streets and the different needs for different things, you mentioned about sidewalks for a pathway or something anyway. But I went up the stairs to Alonzo Way, and I didn't realize, because back in the day, Alonzo Way didn't go back into Station Road, but it does now. So you can actually walk around and down Station Road to where the school used to be. And so having some kind of a sidewalk there at the end, you're at the top of the stairs, I think would make a lot of sense. So I wouldn't mind checking into what's possible, because there's no room down Alonzo Way for a sidewalk. I cannot see it ever being there. But I could see possibly going around that corner. And then it would link into the one that's up already at the school or it's on, where Lillian Gray's house is up here. So anyway, just from walking around, that kind of jumped out at me as maybe possible, but probably too expensive. So, those are just, I think, my initial comments. Thank you.
Who would like to go next?
Yeah.
Councillor Lightfoot.
Following up on Councillors Toss and McCann, I think we all would like underground. So if there's some accommodation where in the future we can have access to a conduit or whatever.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. As far as the sidewalks east of Main Street, Longs Way never did have a sidewalk, as you said. I don't see a lot of foot traffic up there, so to me that would be on the bottom of my priority list. The sidewalk above Ms. Gray's residence, I think, would be adequate at this point. And I was just curious though, you made some comment about 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th streets, something about, were you saying there is parking on both sides of those streets?
Yes, as far as I could tell, looking at historic street views, it looked like, well, not all of them. I think 2nd was probably similar to 1st in terms of it probably had like just an open pavement edge, not really defined parking area. But as far as I could tell, I think 3rd, 5th, and 6th had parking both sides. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I just, reviewing some of the historic street view images, it looked like there was parking both sides with a curb.
And I do believe 2nd had parking on both sides.
Okay.
And I think on occasion, parking on both sides on 1st Street might be advantageous when we have large events or when the ferry is closed and you've got a lot of West Side people parking on the south end of town. I know that the right of way has been cleared back on some of those properties, so I'm not sure what distance you actually have, but between the alley and Fraser, I think there's probably adequate space for parking on both sides. From the alley to First or to Main, that's a difficult turn, and so I can see maintaining just one side of parking from the alley to Main Street on First.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, from the alley to Fraser, I think there's adequate room for 2 lanes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to say about the grass, because in some ways grass is maybe easier to maintain than picking out grass between all the bricks that were historically along the walkways. And I know it looked really nice, but we did have a couple of residents that would go by, who would go with their vinegar and knives or whatever and pick out all the grass that kept popping up, even though I believe there was some sort of landscaping cloth underneath. It does make sense to have that though, if you've got ornamental, some way to access under that strip if you've got ornamental lighting. So I'm like on the fence about that one. I'm not sure. The ornamental lighting was really appreciated, and it gave it the community quite a nice feel. I'm curious on between 3rd and 4th, you said the laneway or the roadway is 20 meters. Does that allow enough space for angle parking on one side and parallel parking on the other?
That's something, yeah, I've thought about that in the back of my mind and would have to take a look at it. You probably the angle parking would take more, it would take a portion of a parking lane and a drive lane. You may only get angle parking on one side. So we'd have to take a look, because I think typically you'd have a wider road allowance, maybe 25 meters in some of those cases. But something that could be looked at, because you probably can get more parking. It's just a matter of your road allowance width and the limitations for having, traffic flow in each direction. Whether you could add a parallel parking lane, would have to take a look at it. It would be tight. It would be really tight.
Yeah, because if you alienate the parallel parking on the other side, there's probably not a lot of advantage for angle parking. But if you could do angle on one side and parallel on the other, I would assume you increase your capacity.
Yeah, something could look at for sure.
I think historically, I used to say the village was parking poor, because there's a lot of people, if the service sector regains its vitality that it had before the fire, there's a lot of people from outside of the community that come in and park. We used to confront the parking bylaw from the TNRD that says every business has to have 6 or 16 or whatever the rule was, citing that once a person comes into the community, they park once and then they go to numerous businesses. Not every business needs that number because it's a walkable access. Once you're parked, you can go to every store virtually in the downtown core. The downtown center line with the trees, I mean, that's a highway, so I don't think Modi would probably like us putting trees down the middle of Main Street. It's maintained by them. The other thing with putting trees in the center, this year we were very fortunate not having a lot of snow, but some years we have a lot of snow. And so historically it's been sort of piled in the middle of the street until we could get it out of the downtown core. So just another point of interest, those trees along Main Street, I think we planted them in 2010. When they did originally rebuild Main Street, which I think was around 2000, there was an irrigation system that was set up, but we could never get it to work. We spent numerous public works hours trying to get it to be functional. And I think part of it was the type of pipe that was used was the improper pipe. It was too hard and whatever. But so irrigation along the Main Street in particular for trees, and maybe even on the back street, I'm not sure how much that would increase costs, but we kept looking at that irrigation system and wishing it would work because we used a lot of public work hours to keep those trees alive initially. I'll probably have more to say once I hear other comments.
Councillor Michelle, would you like to make any comments?
I'm with Councillor Lightfoot on this. All of our streets were both sides parking plus double lane driving from 2nd right through to 6th, I believe. And I wouldn't want to see losing that. I mean, we're hoping that we get our services back in town. And like Jesua said, there's lots of people from outside that come in and would park. Friday afternoons, you could never find parking in town. So I wouldn't want to lose any of that. Other than that, I'd like to see the trees back where we had them along the sidewalks and the streetlights. It'll be nice to get streetlights back, the ornamental, because it's pretty dark through town in the evenings. And that's about it.
Thank you. I agree as well. I think, I don't know how much this is important or not, but as Councillor Lightfoot said, Main Street is Highway 12. And historically it used to turn at 6th Street and go down 6th Street and then down across the bridge. And so it was very busy through town. In fact, people could turn anywhere on any of the streets and go up Fraser and off the end of Fraser, go down and across. When they built the new bridge, that stopped. right? And it made a huge difference as a thorough, it used to be a thoroughfare through there, right? So it made a huge difference in the traffic that goes through. Now it seems to be when there's, or before the fire, festivals or major events or that sort of thing, that we see the traffic.
Mhm.
But saying that, I mean, I agree we need to maximize parking options as much as possible. I know along Fraser Street, there's a number of homes that are going to be requiring drop downs in front of their homes to access their yards or their parking on site, which is going to then take away some of the parking options. I would also like to see some, if possible, or find out more information about diagonal parking on one side, not the whole Fraser Street, but part of it, and parallel parking on the other. Like maybe there's a way to indent the sidewalks, or maybe there's a way to increase the capacity of the space if we needed to. So I'd like to hear more about that. As far as Alonzo Way, Station Road, I know there is a sidewalk, and is it still there, that goes up 6th and around past Miss Gray's house. It's not a very accessible sidewalk because of the stairs that are there on that corner. They've always been an issue, but it's what they did at the time, I guess, to accommodate bringing the sidewalk up to Station Road. I mean, I don't know if that's something that could be looked at. And there is a sidewalk only on the one side of Station Road, which I think is plenty. Yeah, and then your explanation of Loring Way, Ponderosa, that sort of thing. I think, it's very low walking traffic. People go for walks and walk their dogs and that sort of thing. But I think the system that's up there is probably would suffice. That's my opinion. Yeah, those are my thoughts. Other questions, ideas, thoughts, comments, Councillor McCann?
A couple things popped up for me. One was the bricks, the decorative bricks. And I'm really curious because I presume they're there for a reason, like partly because they look good, but I don't know. So that to me is the question, like, do you want to continue that? Was it tough, like you said, to maintain? Or, are you going to hang on to that? Are you going to let that go? Because personally, I don't know what the benefits or drawbacks of those old decorative bricks are. I have no idea. But I did notice that from the fire, there's lots of them missing. And so it's kind of got things bumpy and around. The other thing I noticed walking around today was the bigger trees and the roots. So it seems like you have to allow an awful big space for your tree to grow. And you can't have that cement or whatever, your sidewalk or whatever it is, very close, because any of these trees that are any age at all, everything's lifting, right? It lifts up. So I presume we have to kind of consider that when we're considering trees and what we're putting around the trees and near the trees, and if there's a water line or irrigation required, is it going to be a permanent requirement, or is it a first 10 years or what, right? Those are all lots of questions about, we need and want our trees, but we have to be really careful about where we put them and how we get them started and how we maintain them, I think.
Thank you. Councillor Toss.
Thank you, Mayor O'Connor. Just to piggyback on Councillor McCann's comments, one of the things about bricks, I think, is that they afford a little bit of drainage in between the bricks, so they don't tend to pool water as much. But also, in terms of tree growth underneath bricks, it also mitigates the cracking of sidewalks, so that you can actually do repairs more easily with bricks if you're going to change configurations. That's my understanding. Or you had to fix something with a root, you'd be able to do it more expeditiously than cracking cement.
Okay, that makes sense.
So I know the village didn't always have those wide sidewalks with those bricks. Like that was something that was put in again, like early 2000s, right? With the bricks and the side. when they put in the trees, when they put in I think the bricks were for accessing the water systems that
okay.
were under that sort of things.
Yeah.
Daryl, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to pipe in with a couple of just comments. Those bricks typically that was I think planned because we have street light ducting raceways through there, so that just makes the access to those ducts a lot easier. You're not jackhammering sidewalks out, so you're just removing bricks. So if you ever have to, put in new ducts or replace wiring, that sort of thing, which we may be doing upcoming, depending on what happens with our streetlight grant. Um, when I looked at the street lights on Main Street, it looks like that we've managed to find a design for it that was done about 25 years ago, 25 years ago. And there was all ducts put in those brick raceways. I call it a raceway. And it was similarly done on Fraser Street. On Fraser Street, it didn't look like they put in ducts, so we may have to actually pull those bricks and put new wires and ducts. But I think we have to dig into it a bit more because we've only looked at the surface. But I think on Main Street, if we can't reuse the wiring, it would probably be easy just to re-pull the wires through that area. A couple other quick comments. Yeah, if we look at underground power and even limited amounts, if we look at going up center lane, typically what you do is you would send like typical sections to BC Hydro and they'll comment on it. The only challenge we may have to consider is because we would have corridors on center lane for sewer and for storm sewer. They might overlap or be a little bit too close, so that might be a concern to BC Hydro. BC Hydro also likes to put any underground in boulevard areas where it's soft-scaped. So it's either in grass or it's in maybe a brick raceway. So it's an easy re and re. They really push back hard if you're trying to put any underground power under pavement or concrete. In some instances, like in commercial areas, you can't. There is no choice, so they have to accept that. But that's just a conversation to have with hydro. Could be an option too, potentially, depending what's built. If we say, for example, maybe look at a little bit of a right of way off the back of lots for underground hydro in the lane. There's if you start really thinking about it, there's ways to get about it. And on a lot of strata developments, that's what's done because typically on stratas, your roads are a lot narrower and there isn't a lot of room for your gas and your comms and your power. So typically what you might do, and it's a little bit easier when it's a greenfield development because you can establish a right of way before lots are sold. In this case, you're coming in after the fact. So it's a challenge in terms of, okay, you'd have to get approval from owners that, you'd need a right of way off the back of a lot. If, for example, Hydro would not let you actually put an underground in the 6 meter allowance that we have in the lane. What else? I think in terms of street trees and on the alternate section that I'd shown there, I was thinking that, that wouldn't be on Main Street or Fraser. I think it would be more almost like a festival street on 4th Street. So you maybe do it on one or two streets, perhaps. Not on all of them. And I know on the one example slide I had it showed it as being grass, but I was thinking that in our case, we'd put like river rock, a decorative river rock, and that would also really, it'd be a good storage area for water runoff, and then it would slowly soak away. So it wouldn't be actually a grassed area. So it'd be, the river rock, and it'd be generally probably fairly low maintenance. Any other, yeah, I appreciate all the comments. There's some really good discussion going on. I'm just seeing if I had made any other notes here. Yeah, no, I think that was the couple of key points that I wanted to make there. So please carry on with the discussion.
Thank you. Councillor Toss.
Thanks, Mayor O'Connor. Daryl, I was wondering, did you ever receive the correspondence between myself and BC Hydro, and they had actually provided us with a plan for the town, two different plans, in fact, that we weren't able to follow up on? Would you be interested in receiving that? And if so, would you be able to, CAO Mumbercat, would you be able to find that correspondence and share it with our engineer?
I can look for that correspondence. I can't say for sure I can find it, but I can look for it.
Okay, if you
Um,
can't find it, then come to me. I'm also quite busy with my house and whatnot. So if you could follow up, that'd be most excellent. If not, let me know and I'll make an effort. Thank
And
you.
I haven't seen that, but it'd be very timely too, because we're having active discussions with some of the power relocation in conjunction with our sewers and stuff.
So they were under the impression at my request to they provided a plan for the whole village, whereas I was looking only for a plan like a hybrid sort of system that would go down Center Lane, just because of the over Main Street and over Fraser Street overhead wires. So access, like giving the commercial and the residential hydro access. So it just made sense to have a hybrid approach at this juncture while the sewer and water were being looked at, right? So it is timely. And I believe at that time they said $11 million. Originally, when it came to council, it had a $4.8 million price tag. It was voted down because it would take too long with the previous council. It's too expensive and property owners would be responsible for the hookups after. Whereas if they were overhead, they would be covered. So there was extensive conversations, but like I say, they didn't understand what I was requesting, and I didn't have the capacity at the time to follow up and sort of hone in on what actually we were looking for. But yeah, between Diane and I will get that to you. Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
Daryl could take a look at that. Okay, back to the streets. Daryl, is there anything that like we've all kind of had a turn to comment around the street sidewalks, that sort of thing? Is there anything you're missing that you would like a bit more about to hear from us?
Yeah, I think a lot of streets. You'd mentioned the sidewalk up on Station Street, and I know one of the issues is that the way it's configured right now, and with the rebuild complete in that area and the residential fence in place, that drops off a fair bit. So one of the things we may want to look at is, do we need that sidewalk there, or do we want to pull that sidewalk back a little bit? Because typically in residential areas, I don't know that it's desirable to have the sidewalk right against the property line. In commercial areas, of course, because you need property access to commercial entranceways and such. But for residential areas, often it may be more desirable to have like a boulevard strip of some sort in that area. And pulling that sidewalk back, because one of the things we may have to look at is we may have to, put some sort of, fencing just so there's no fall hazards behind that drop off there. Um,
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I'm trying to picture the drop off you're talking about.
yeah,
I can't picture it on the.
it's on Station on the west side between 6th and 7th.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, down into the RCMP property.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Lightfoot.
I'll just make comment on that. When the school was there, it was a high traffic area. It's really changed its dynamics since the fire. There's one residence up there now. So I'm not sure if it's appropriate or whatever, but their input might be something that influences what we do. But it's a really quite a low traffic area, except for the holiday train come December every year. People don't use it very much. A couple of the other things, though, if I can go back to it, as numerous people have said, the bricks have been an access to the infrastructure that lays beneath. And it kind of gives character. I think that's probably why it was chosen. It gives the community a little bit of character. But from my experience, the ornamental lighting on Fraser Street, because we had to service them a couple of times, didn't have any conduit. It was actually quite alarming that the wires were just in the gravel bed. Another point about those light standards, some of them, I'm not sure how many of them, weren't anchored properly. So that maybe needs to be addressed when that's looked at. And you probably are aware, but several of them, I think two on the main street and at least one, maybe two on the back street, had about 6 feet up or whatever, had access to power so that you could plug in an extension cord and draw power off the light poles for special events or whatever. But generally the sidewalks, when I was there, we just did patchwork, just fixing up what had been damaged. The majority of the work was done in early 2000s on Main Street. But my personal preference is I really like sidewalk that has aggregate. I know it's a little pricier, but I think it's less slippery. And I think that gives good character and sort of, it's a little classier
I
than
think they
just-
alternated, didn't they?
On the Main Street, they
On the
did.
Main Street, the
Yeah.
pads, yeah, it added character. The aggregate, regular, yeah, it added some.
Although, listening to your discussion today, I can even see putting bricks occasionally on the Main Street if that's where the water line
Yeah.
access comes in, just for future maintenance.
So that decorative element to the sidewalks, I think, is maybe what we're hearing is important, right?
Right, so an exposed aggregate finished surface. And I don't think it's that much more expensive to do that. It's just a bit more labor. I think they put a set retarder, I think, on the surface or something, and then they after it sets, they just wash off the surface.
Okay.
Well, and maybe not everywhere, but definitely we're in high traffic areas. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Other than that, the drop downs, I drove down Fraser Street today, just looking at who had drop downs. And I mean, some of the drop downs don't need to be there anymore because the way the house has been constructed, it's not necessary. But ideally, it would be nice if people did have the possibility of parking in their yard. But I don't think there's that many, and I don't know how you would address that other than going from homeowner to homeowner and asking.
How is that typically done, Daryl?
Well, this is kind of a, interesting situation where, you may have a house now in a different spot than was historically. So your driveway letdown shifted. So I think we're going to need a project of some sort to either change the curbs or, do some sort of modifications to change letdowns and so forth. But I could see, at least on the west side of Fraser Street, that we probably need to do at least maybe at half the length of curb, because I think looking where they put some of the poles they put in a straight line, but the curb it offsets a little bit when you get halfway down. And I think you want to pull it out, so because typically your poles should be behind the curb, not in front of the curb in the roadway. So I think we've got a portion of curb we have to probably change regardless. And I think we should be looking at throughout where we've got to put in new letdowns and take out old ones. I think we probably should look at that as perhaps one of our projects, and depending on funding and so forth.
Yeah, and I guess there's the issue of properties that aren't developed yet, and
Who knows?
will they ever need a drop down? Who knows? Councillor Toss?
Thank you, Mayor O'Connor. I actually was able to find those BC Hydro emails, so I forwarded them to you just while we've been talking here. But one of the things that popped up when I did the search on BC Hydro was also a conversation about EV stations in front of the hub and what they would need. So I'm not sure if that's still being factored into planning, but there was quite a discussion, and I forwarded it on to you and the CIO and the rest of council for your consideration. But I think an EV station, if we can work that into whatever downtown planning, would be advantageous.
Yeah, my understanding it is in the plans for the hub, so that's good.
Thank
I
you.
thought,
And I
Councillor-
think one of the things as we progress, I think it'll be, what I'm hearing is that there's a desire to maintain parking both sides from First, I guess, all the way to Sixth. So considering that in our sections of how we move forward, I think we'd probably want to maybe refine some of the options and look, are we considering something with maybe a center bio swale or not? Because that would simplify the options. I mean, in terms of what we're doing there, if we have parking both sides, the only real variable we have that we can change is maybe the lane width. So we can maybe make the lanes a little bit narrower, or perhaps maybe we have to make the paved area a little bit wider again if we're putting in angled parking. So there's a couple of things that maybe we have to come back and have a discussion about.
For sure. Councillor McCann.
I was just thinking about this section between the Fraser Street that goes from 6th to 7th. And how, Mary, you were talking about back in the day that everybody went that way. But there's that one little section of Fraser Street that's really unattended. But if and when this park becomes more used as a park, then that's going to get more attention, like tourist attention and a tour bus wanting to park because of the view here. And it would be really nice if we could do something about that one little section of road and sidewalk and just see what possible things we could do there. Because right now there is no grant money available for the park to do anything about that because they're already all used up in their money. But it would be nice because like when Hydro put their pole in out here, I notice it every time I go by and I think, they put that pole in the middle of the road. They didn't really pay attention to where they should have put it. They just parked it there for whatever reason. But yeah, just that whole, I don't know what we can do and how much it'll cost us, but should be nice to clean that up a bit.
Thank you. Councillor, sorry,
Quick,
Daryl.
just, I think, BC Hydro, when they put their poles, and I think typically they want to keep a straight line, because if you start off setting, because I think if you go to the south side of Fraser, there's, the poles aren't behind the curb, and then you get to the north side and it's in the roadway. They typically don't like, shifting them one way or the other, because now what they need an anchor brace to hold the pole in line. So that may require an anchor that goes into private property, which we wouldn't do. So those are some of the things that they look from their side. I do think when they probably do this stuff, and now we're having pretty good communications with them back and forth and regular, correspondence and emails. So it'll be a little bit better. But I think when they were, under the gun to try and get power in, they didn't communicate as well as they could have.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Lightfoot.
I'm just giving my opinion, and I'm not sure if it's majority. I kind of doubt it, but I have concerns about the center planting, just because traffic flow can be pretty congested, and I would prefer to see trees or whatever on between the sidewalk and the curb rather than in the middle of the street.
Mm-hmm.
I just think street space is in short supply.
Yeah, I have a hard time picturing what that looks like. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like a boulevard, yeah.
I have a hard time picturing what it might look like for Lytton.
Mm-hmm.
And people do U-turns quite frequently.
Councillor Toss.
Thank you, Mayor O'Connor. Just for the record, I would not be for the center lane planting of any kind for various reasons outlined by Councillor Lightfoot. But at the end of the day, I believe it to be a maintenance issue and the snow clearage. Thanks.
Any other comments, questions? Councillor Lightfoot.
My assumption is it'll be a whole list of improvements that we would like to do. But I believe the priority is the downtown commercial area and Fraser Street. Other ones may be valuable in the future, but given that resources are always somewhat limited, I think I would see that as a priority at this stage.
I did like the comment about the sidewalk access from the school historically on Station Road. Thinking in that context, with the land use at that time and, people parking probably all over from 6th to 7th, it would have been needed. But now, depending what the land use is, where the school is, maybe it isn't. That was a very pertinent point that was, I think it was Councillor Lightfoot that made that.
Yeah, but saying that, we don't know the future of that property, right? Who knows? And I would say, you said between 6th and 7th, which was actually the school parking lot. The between 5th and 6th is where it was packed with parents picking up their kids and that sort of thing.
Once that gets developed, then it'll be more clear what's required.
That's right. Yeah, that's a good point. Councillor Michelle, do you have any other comments, thoughts?
No, I don't have anything else to add.
Okay. Let's see if I'm not seeing any more hands up or people that like to comment. Again, Daryl, there's nothing else you can think of that you're looking for from us.
No, I think that gives us a little bit more direction. It does sound like that there is probably not a lot of support for like a center bioswale set up with trees and stuff, which that's fine because an alternate option if we have like curbside drainage to the outside of the street. I might look at some CB drywall infiltration systems that eliminate the amount of runoff we have to direct to pipes and such. So there's still options and backup plans that we can look at. I think in terms of the options that you've identified, one of them I think is we've got the existing bylaws section, which I think is still fairly relevant. Options that we could consider to change on that is maybe adjusting the lane widths, but also looking at angle parking, which seems to be some desire for that. So I think we should take a look at an option like that.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you. Just one last comment. I'm thinking because Lytton First Nations are a major landowner and the biggest personal landowner in town, that maybe a conversation with them about what they see as the future for parking in front of their large Main Street development might be in order, or hopefully potential development.
Thank you. Okay, so we do have a two-part recommended motion here to receive this for information, and then, of course, come back to a regular council meeting with a report. Councillor Lightfoot will put that forward, seconded by Councillor McCann. All those in favor? Carried. All right, moving on to new business. I do require a motion to cancel the April 7th Committee of the Whole meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Councillor McCann, seconded by Councillor Michelle. Sorry, hand was up first. All right, so are there any comments regarding that? No, all those in favor? Carried. Perfect. Okay, that brings us now to the adjournment of the meeting, and I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor McCann, seconded by Councillor. Nobody wants to go. Councillor Toss. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Carried, and that brings us to the end. So I'll turn it back over to Corporate Officer Storchenko.
Thank you.
Mayor Connor. So that concludes the Committee of the Whole meeting for March 3rd. Thank you for attending. We wish everyone a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.